Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Self-Publishing Insiders. Today, I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time because today my guest is none other than Jane Friedman. Welcome, Jane.
Hello, Jim. Great to be here again.
It's so nice to have you back. I seriously have been looking forward to this one. And for those of you, or if any of you aren't familiar with Jane, let me just read her awesome bio here. So Jane has spent her entire career in the book publishing industry with a focus on author education and trend reporting. She is the editor of the Bottom Line newsletter. If you are not a subscriber to that, do yourself a favor and subscribe. It is the essential publishing industry newsletter for authors, and it was named and Jane was named Publishing Commentator of the Year by Digital Book World in 2023. Her latest book is The Business of Being a Writer. It's in the second edition by the University of Chicago Press. It's received a starred review from the Library Journal as well. In addition to serving on grant panels for the National Endowment for the Arts and the Creative Work Fund, Jane works with organizations such as the Authors Guild to bring transparency to the business of publishing. So we're so happy to have you here. Last year, we did a look back at the prior year, then the look ahead at 2025. It was one of our most watched episodes, and for good reason. So I thought, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's take a recap at what transpired in 2025 and what's happening in 2026. We were talking off camera, Jane, and I was telling you this conversation is going to go by so fast.
Yeah.
And as usual, I've got like a zillion questions, and I'll probably get to maybe less than 1% of them. But I'll just hop into it so we can get to the crux of it, and then we can interact with some comments and some questions from our viewers out there. What I noticed in your 2025 year in review, you kind of described a year that was marked by legal battles, like Anthropic, maybe some institutional failures, or maybe that's too strong of a word, collapses. Eighth Note Press comes to mind, NaNoWriMo, Baker and Taylor. NaNoWriMo to me seems like it happened years ago. I guess that's like the decade that was 2025. But you also mentioned some cultural shifts, like the traditional book critic going away.
Yeah.
And then in your What's Ahead for 2026 piece, we kind of see more experimentation, especially with audio and different platforms. So after everything that you've covered in your 2025 recap, this is kind of a long question, sorry. After everything that you've covered in your recap, what inspires you the most about where publishing's headed in 2026?
Well, in some ways, it's the same answer I might have given last year, which is there are a lot of paths open or opportunities that exist for authors as well as publishers, but I'm speaking to a group of authors that don't rely on the major platforms. So definitely in all of the reporting that I did last year for the newsletter, I just uncovered example after case study after situation where people were doing things in their own way and uncovering ways to reach readers and sell books that really have nothing to do with Amazon or the major platforms, people finding their readerships in ways that respect their values and help avoid burnout. So, you mentioned the Eighth Note Press failure, which, I had a little bit of schadenfreude there. Like I was kind of happy to see that crash and burn. For those who don't know what it is, it was a publishing imprint that was launched by ByteDance. That's the parent company of TikTok. Now, this was before the wholesale, the US division stuff. Not that I know that it made a difference, but they saw this book talk community, which was one of the biggest communities on the app, and how it was driving book sales and book conversations. And you could tell they like wanted a piece of this, right? Because they have like TikTok Shop and etc. So, they launched their imprint, and it didn't even take 2 years before they were like, publishing is hard. We're done. So like, even if you have the biggest platform, most popular platform, arguably for young people, for readers, for books, doesn't mean you can sell a book. So I think that is actually great news for the average author or publisher.
Wow. Did you expect it to go under? Or it was so funny because when it happened, the mainstream was like, "Oh my God, like this is going to be huge." And what
Right,
did you?
right. Everyone was like, "Oh no, they're gonna, put their finger on the lever of what gets noticed and what
Yeah.
gets sold," which, rightly so to have that fear. We've seen it happen in other places. But, they just, I mean, maybe they could have succeeded, but they just didn't have the wherewithal. They didn't put in the right resources. They didn't have any respect for how books get discovered traditionally. And I would argue they didn't have a lot of respect for the readers, the
Mm.
book talk community itself, because they love print, they love bookstores,
Mhm.
they love engagement off the app as well. And TikTok went in with just basically a digital first strategy. And by the time they realized they were way off the mark,
It was too late.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the only bad part of this, is that some authors were really left in the lurch. Like they thought their books were coming out and suddenly, all of these plans they've made are null and void. And some of these were self-published authors who had signed with TikTok. So my heart went out to them. But I think some of them recovered really nicely. They got other deals and it was a very
Mhm.
high profile situation. So I think most people were able to recover.
Yeah. It was interesting to watch. And something else that we all watched collectively as an industry was the Anthropic settlement. That was kind of a defining
Mm,
moment, but it
yes,
also left a lot of questions unresolved too.
yes.
So this year, as we kind of move forward with OpenAI and the Microsoft lawsuits, do you have any thoughts on what outcomes you feel are the most likely, and maybe which ones authors should stop expecting?
Well, I always like to remind people when you look at that Anthropic settlement, the 1.5 billion settlement, where I imagine some people watching this are going to be getting some money if you published
Mhm.
a book that was involved in the piracy of that case. The piracy is key here. I think some people just don't quite understand that while there is this enormous settlement in favor of authors and publishers, the ruling wasn't that AI model training is copyright infringement.
Yep.
That is still, so far, kind of an unresolved issue, whether or not that's fair use, whether it's infringement. And so what I'm seeing is the lawsuits that are now in motion, the new lawsuits that are being filed, everyone is glomming onto this. How did you train your books? Did you
Mhm.
train on illegally acquired or pirated books? Because now we're going to get our payout.
Okay.
It's not necessarily focused on, was the training itself infringement? I'm sure that question is going to get brought up again and again in the lawsuits, but I'm also seeing a huge money grab,
Yeah.
of course, because of this Anthropic settlement. So I don't know. I don't necessarily think this is good or bad, but that has really influenced what I'm seeing from these lawsuits.
Yeah. And so one part of the story is some of the titles were acquired, I guess, legally. They had purchased the titles and they used these books to train their models. Whereas the judgment was, were the piracy, well, what the illegal activity was, were the books that were pirated and then used to
Right,
train.
right, exactly.
Okay. And they're only looking at books that were copyrighted, correct? And so some authors weren't a party to that because their
Right.
publishers didn't copyright their books within 5 years of publishing.
Yeah, so that was the other kind of shocking revelation from my
Yeah.
perspective, is that these major houses, which you would expect, like, their job is IP protection,
Yeah.
and the fact that they failed to register for copyright for their books is just mind-blowing. I'd really love to be on some of the conversations that were had at houses when they discovered that this slipped through the cracks. Who knows why?
Those darn interns.
I know, right? It's like oh god. I mean, having worked internally at these houses, that was one of the checklist items that you did not forget, right? Um, so it's yeah, so and I think this also for some self-publishing authors who maybe didn't feel like it was a necessary step or they
Yeah.
didn't want to pay the fees, whatever. I think we now know you better register your copyright. And it's not too late, I think, even if you hadn't before, I would definitely do it now.
Yeah. I think a lot of authors they feel that, well, I own the IP, I wrote this book and I published it. Don't I have copyright protection as soon as I publish it?
Right.
And so that's not necessarily, I mean, you do own the copyright, but.
Yeah. I mean, you're protected, but when it comes to, these sorts of cases and damages, they're putting some fences, let's say, around who's going to get payouts. And that's one of the most, I would say, frictionless ways to say, okay, if you were serious about this and you registered for your copyright, you're part of the class. So this was all about defining the class, because these are often class action lawsuits. I'm sure other cases, maybe they'll draw the circle differently. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting. When you look at sort of AI training and AI translation and AI narration all together, do you have any thoughts on what the biggest long-term impact will be? Maybe not so much on the technology, but on who gets published and how risk is managed?
For AI translation and audio specifically?
Yeah.
So this is something that I actually deal with personally on the audiobook side, because for so many types of nonfiction, and I work with a university press, University of Chicago, they don't have their own audiobook publishing arm or division. They just count on audiobook publishers to license, which is how it used to be before audio got so big. Okay. It was pretty rare for a publisher to have their own audiobook division producing their own audio. So, the first edition of my book sold to an audiobook publisher, Tantor, but the second edition hasn't. And like I've every week I get a request from a reader, where's the audio edition? And it's like, well, Chicago's not going to do it.
Well, everybody should be so lucky to have readers clamoring for the audiobook editions of their book.
I'm not sure that Tantor earned out their investment from the first edition yet. So it's like I'm because I don't have the rights, I'm sitting here in limbo. Yeah. Because for a traditional publisher, they're probably going to do it with a human narrator. And so we're in this really interesting transition period where I think some publishers and authors too, they're very comfortable moving ahead with AI narration in order to get the costs low enough to make that format make sense in the market. I'm not a best-selling author, unfortunately, as much as, the writing and publishing community might think that I'm selling tons of copies. It's very modest in the grand scheme of things.
Well, you have a very laser-focused niche.
Right, exactly. And that's true of many types of nonfiction publishing. So I think we're going to see some rapid advancement in some of these areas, or adoption of AI, because it is at a point now where it's good enough. And there's, I'm sure many listeners know, there's now excellent voice cloning done by companies like 11 Labs. You can work with a firm like Spoken, which uses 11 Labs technology to help create multicast audiobooks. So there's so many options now that keeps the costs low. And I think the pushback we're seeing from some people who are very anti-AI, I think there will probably always be that hardcore contingent. I will only listen to a human narrator. But for many of us, the AI is good enough, and it's going to help with accessibility for so many different authors and titles. And it's hard for me to say this is a bad thing. I don't think human narrators are suddenly going to be out of work. They have a lot of work already. And I think that especially the big five are going to continue using human narration and doing that higher production value. I'll add one more thing about this, and then we can move to translation if you want. Sure. I think the concern I have is, and this concern has been voiced by others, is that right now audiobooks carry this higher perceived value and they're earning higher dollars, and it's been a boon for publishers. This is their growth area. It has been for years. But if the market gets flooded with all of this AI audiobook content, that has the potential to decrease the value. So some think we're going to see a bifurcation of the market. With, AI audiobooks might carry a lower price point, which makes sense. And then you have the human narrated audiobooks that carry a higher perceived value and a higher price point. So it'll just be interesting. And definitely I'm paying attention to what Audible and Spotify are doing, these competitors who, I'm sure that they're, looking at this and deciding how are we going to navigate this moving forward with our catalogs.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I believe, and maybe somebody from my team can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Apple with their digital narration caps the price at like $6.99 or something like
Oh,
that.
okay. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think as an industry, we can all agree that, hey, yeah, human narration is absolutely the gold standard with the heart and the soul of these works. But I couldn't agree with you more that it enhances the accessibility, not just for the authors, but also for readers
Yes.
as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Kind of pulling on that audio thread there a little bit, you've had flags, or you'd mentioned in some of your, I think it was in your recap, or maybe it was 2026 looking forward, short form and ad-supported audio as major stories, I guess, going forward in 2026. Why do you think audio, maybe even rather than ebooks or print, is kind of where we're seeing the most meaningful innovation right now?
I think it has to do with how consumer behavior is being shaped by technology.
Jane, pause. Oh. Maybe it's me. There you are. Are you back?
I'm here.
Yay!
Am I still here? Okay.
Did you get my question?
Yeah, okay. I heard it.
Okay.
So I would say, oh yes, short form audio. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's partly how consumer behavior has changed and evolved over time. And it's much easier, I think, for the average consumer to be multitasking and then listening to a story or an audiobook or a podcast. And some of what we're seeing also, like part of what I'm talking about, you can just bring in podcasting too, is part of what's changing in the market. So YouTube, now layer that into this discussion. It is, after Google, the world's biggest search engine. Yeah. Tons of people go there for entertainment, education, diversion. And so what I'm seeing very interestingly, especially with self-published authors, is putting up full audiobooks, no charge, like we're talking about videos that go on for 6, 8, 10 hours. And then there are ad breaks, and the authors, in some instances, will earn more money from the ads than they do from outright sales of that audiobook from retailers. Obviously, there are a lot of variables here, but there are some people who are doing some fascinating work. There was one person that I covered who basically does a YouTube serialization focused on zombies. I'm not going to remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize to this author. But, it's like, I don't know, 20 to 40,000 words every week. And he's earning money off those ads. Not something I would have predicted a few years ago, but I can see why it's happening. I can, like, all of the changes in how we consume content.
That's amazing. Was that did you say within the last year or two that authors are actually earning from these YouTube serializations?
I mean, it came to my attention within the last year. It may extend even further back.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. So with AI narration, lowering costs and short form audio, reducing commitment, are we moving toward audio kind of becoming a proving ground now for intellectual property?
I don't know, but it's certainly, I think there's a lot more room for experimentation with shorter audio, with short form storytelling and serializations. And I didn't mention podcasts as part of this, but the author I mentioned with the zombie series, that also goes out as a podcast. He makes ad money from the podcast. So there's just a lot of different entry points, and it doesn't, my guess is that the YouTube platform and podcasting platforms, it's maybe it's a devil that people would rather deal with rather than the Amazon devil. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of pick which platform you want to deal with. But there's one author I've been following for a really long time, Scott Sigler. He got into audio before it was a growth area, before anyone was talking about it. This was like around 2008. And he was reading his book chapter by chapter and distributing it as an Apple Podcast the year that Apple Podcast app was released. That's how early he was into this. Wow. 20 years later, practically, he still does this. Talk about consistency and showing up and doing the work. He's still doing that. He hasn't found a lot of traction on YouTube, interestingly, but I think it's because he's been so podcast focused. And so he's also looking, and he also earns a lot of money through sales, through retail. So anyway, I think my main point here is that because the audiobook market, let's say through 2023, 2024, especially before Spotify got into it, so much of it was driven by this credit worthiness mentality. And that drove so much of writers' behavior, what the length of the book was, et cetera, because you want people to use their credit on something that's going to feel satisfying and it's going to be long enough. And then Spotify enters the market and disrupts that, because now you've got 15 hours of listening that you can chop up however you like, and you don't feel penalized if you chose the wrong thing. So I think we're kind of in this very interesting stage now where people can think a little more flexibly about length, and not, it has to be like this 8, 10, 12-hour epic. I can do something that's a little more nimble.
Interesting. I remember in the early days of Smashwords, the same thought went into ebook creation, ebook publication. Everybody thought you had to have your ebooks at a certain length.
Yes.
To please the publishers, but then they found out, well, no, I can write as long as I want.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
People are sticking with the book. I wanted to bring up a quick comment here from one of our viewers who said, "True, drawing a pen audiobooks on YouTube is great." So this made me think: are you seeing any particular genre sort of performing better than other genres on YouTube, or is it kind of across the board, do you think?
I mean, what I'm seeing is what I consider commercial fiction. So science fiction, fantasy, horror, romance, those sorts of things.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it could happen with nonfiction. In fact, there was a really fascinating story that I stumbled on. This is with I believe, I don't know where the author lives, but it was reported in UK's bookseller, where there wasn't an audiobook edition for his book for all of the reasons I described earlier.
Yeah.
Or was there? I don't think so. I might be getting that detail wrong, but I don't think so. And so some YouTube channel decided to put up his book on YouTube. This might have been a translated version of his book. They managed to clone his voice because he had given so many interviews in the target language, and they had him reading his own book on their YouTube channel without permission or licensing or anything. He just stumbled on it, and it had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views by the time he discovered it. And, this is obviously upsetting, but he then saw that his sales were increasing as a result. So it's, boy, it's an interesting...
Why can't I make mistakes like that?
I know, right? Yeah, so it's that gets into the AI audio plus AI translation in audio, which is also, I think, going to be ramping up in the years ahead.
Do you see that as kind of a smart, low risk way for indie authors to experiment with audio in 2026?
Yes, do it. You should try it. You should. I mean, what do you have to lose? In my opinion, I would do it if I had the rights, but my publisher doesn't want me doing that.
Okay. All right. I want to shift gears here a little bit and ask you about traditional publishers kind of tapping into the indie community a little bit. I don't know if you caught this story, Jane, but in August of 2025, Publishers Weekly ran a piece about traditional publishers finding success in non-traditional ways, many of which look like indie authors. Why do you think that so much innovation in publishing now is kind of flowing from the indie community to the traditional community, or to traditional publishers versus the other way around?
There are a number of reasons. One is, I think the indie author is closer to the readership. They're closer to where the demand is. They're studying the market and producing things that sell. Especially, I would say, in the romance, fantasy categories. But it's certainly not exclusive to those categories. The other thing is that publishers are looking for low risk projects, things that they know where they can see, yes, we can add value to this. And so if you look at Sourcebooks, they're kind of, I would consider the leader in this. They have an imprint called Bloom Books. It was launched with E.L. James, practically in partnership with her, where she called the shots and said, this is what I want out of a traditional publisher. I know my readership better than you know my readership. You're not going to call the shots.
Yeah.
We'll collaborate, but I have final say. I mean, she kind of just wrote the business plan for the publisher she wanted to work with, and that is what we have in Bloom Books, I would argue. So it's Bloom Books has continued, of course, beyond E.L. James, and they acquire authors on lots of different terms, I'm sure, but clearly one of the things that they do really well is the author retains their digital rights in many cases, and then the author grants Sourcebooks or Bloom Books the print distribution rights. And so Sourcebooks goes to town in getting that book placed in as many retail outlets as possible. And certainly I would argue publishers are just much better positioned to do licensing, foreign rights deals, the things that get really complicated for someone who might not know which publishers and which countries or which languages are going to be most ripe, for that particular book. So I think it's a win-win on both sides. Like, I think the author wins because I don't think they're losing control. If the contract is written appropriately, if they're going in, understanding what this publisher offers, the value, they're going to win. They're going to retain creative control. And then the traditional publisher is doing often what they do best, which is mastering, that physical retail environment. I hadn't, this has been more than a year ago, but I had an interview with Dominique Ricard, the CEO of Sourcebooks, and her team about this initiative and how they work with authors. And their position is really different from what publishers used to say or what they normally say. Yeah. Dominique's position is, author, what is it that you want to see happen? What is your dream? What is the goal? What have you not been able to accomplish that you want to accomplish? And that's what we will try to make happen.
So refreshing.
I know, right? So whether it's New York Times bestseller, global domination, whatever it is, and then they collaborate, and Sourcebooks offers as much data as the author might want in order to help run their business better. And they even, there was one author who wanted very specific data about the sales of her book or about certain marketing efforts. Sourcebooks wasn't able to provide it at first, but they created a tool that did. So that's just how proactive they are. And so, Sourcebooks has kind of, I wouldn't say everyone's copying them because the indie to traditional pipeline has always been there. But I think Sourcebooks was the first to kind of create this structure, operating procedure around it. And now you see Entangled and Simon & Schuster and other places create imprints that are really focused on that activity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very encouraging. I mean, I don't feel like it's ever been an us versus them battle, meaning indie versus trad battle. And we can see this meshing continuously starting to happen. Dominique gave a fantastic presentation at the Novelist Inc. conference back in September. And I think about 3 or 4 times, she's like, look, I am not a traditional publisher.
Yeah, she's funny like that. Yeah.
But she kept pointing to the data, like it's all about the data and the data that they get for their authors to help their authors' careers move forward. It was fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was going to bring up those other traditional players and their imprints like Authors Equity and Zando Slow Burn and Simon Maverick and Simon & Schuster and of course Sourcebooks.
Yeah, the one I would pick out of there to talk about just for a second is Authors Equity. But I see them a little bit differently. I mean, similar but different.
They're the ones that were formed from Penguin Random House veterans, right?
Right. So the former CEO of Penguin Random House, Madeline McIntosh, launched that. She brought some of her colleagues with her. So you've got this. Some call it a hybrid. I don't know if that's the right word. Just because if you go and try to work with them, they're going to likely tell you no. It's, from my perspective, it's as hard to get accepted by them as any traditional publisher. And I think when people hear hybrid, that's not necessarily what they're expecting. I think they're hybrid in the sense that the author is getting a high percentage of the royalties. It's a true collaborative effort, in the way that the source book's effort is collaborative. But their list is quite small at this point, maybe 12 to 24 titles in a year, last time I checked, in their catalog. And they're also funded by authors who are blockbusters. So like Tim Ferriss, James Clear, Louise Penny, like these are best-selling authors. And so what I see from Authors Equity is, we are for authors who have, in some regard, they have huge platforms, they know how to sell books, and they're looking for a publisher that isn't the normal traditional publisher who may or may not do what they want, who's taking a bigger cut of the profits. They're like, those authors are like, they're done with that. They're ready to have, to take the value that they have created, and be respected for the value that they've brought to the table.
It looked like I disappeared there for a second, but I'm back. Hey. Do you think that the indie community kind of push those authors in that direction a little bit? Like, hey, we see what's happening over there. We've created all this value. We know we have readership.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I've seen a little bit for Tim Ferriss. I've certainly seen him looking around for years. It's like, I'm just speculating here, thinking there's got to be a better deal around here somewhere. Like, because
he's tried different things. He tried working with Amazon. I don't know if he self-published or not, but you can tell that he's like, there's, some of these authors, especially if I were James Clear, I would be thinking, I built a 3 million newsletter list. I do not want your average royalty contract. God, the nerve of James Clear. Jane, you've written that professional book criticism sort of going away as a cultural loss, but not a commercial one.
Yeah.
So if legitimacy is no longer conferred by, say, reviews or legacy media, who or what do you think confers it now?
I would say it's the community, it's readers, it's the people who care most about whatever genre or category it is that you're working in. So there's going to be thought leaders or influencers or commentators or self-appointed critics. And those are going to be the people who help spread the word about things. There was a lot of, this has been happening for years. And I think the way I might have positioned it in my look back for 2025 is that when the Associated Press said no more book reviews, it kind of did feel like the last nail in the coffin. And there was a lot of gnashing of teeth, pulling of hair, but it was actually milder this time. It was almost like people finally saying, all right, it really is over now. Because for years and years, book critics, professional critics have been saying, we matter, you need us, you really need us. We swear you need us and you need to pay us. And to me, it was a losing game. You're going to have to find another way to go about this and prove your worth. And, this is where we get into conversations about the creator economy, which influencers, and some of this has kind of like a toxic throwaway vibe to it. But there are little nuggets of goodness in there. It's like you have to know where to look. Like if you look at Ted Gioia, who's like a music critic, he went off and started his Substack years ago and has been predicting again and again the demise of certain types of media. I'm not quite like he is on this. I think there's always going to be a role for traditional or so-called legacy outlets. But certainly I think he points the way toward, if you want to have a career as a critic or in criticism, you're probably going to be dealing directly with readers, which is no different than what indie authors have been doing. So now we're seeing that happen on the media and journalism side. And criticism is just a subset of journalism. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of harsh calling it criticism, but I guess it's been like that for generations. Do you think authors are better off today sort of ignoring that I don't know if we want to call it mainstream validation entirely, and focusing more on leverage, or maybe another way to frame it, if that sounds confusing, like what does validation mean today?
Yeah. I mean, I have been preaching for years, please stop looking for more book reviews, professional book reviews. I call it criticism, but it's really just a professional book review from someone who we've all agreed has a role to play as a critic, whether that's Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal. Like, I'm not saying those places don't serve a purpose. They do.
Are you saying specifically paid reviews?
No, I mean any and all.
I just wanted to make it.
Because I do think there is this sense, especially from indie authors, of wanting to be validated, of wanting acceptance, of wanting, entry into certain things. Yeah. I find very few authors are going after those reviews because they think they're going to really move copies. If they do, they're very misguided and they don't understand what leads to sales. But I find that a lot of people just don't feel like they have properly published a book unless they have a proper review. And I just think that's nonsense. You can get word of mouth, you can get community buy-in, you can get media coverage in so many ways. And might I add that most book criticism and most book reviews are shallow, not interesting, and don't lead to any further media. So it would have to be like a really hard-hitting sort of review, like a starred review or something that's on the cover of a publication in order to really move the needle. So I encourage authors, and really, frankly, publishers alike, look at something else. Look at the reader engagement. Look at the reader communities. Look at the Substacks that deal with your topic or your category.
That's fantastic advice. Hope you guys are paying attention out there. And it kind of speaks to gosh, I'm gonna forget her name. Did I write it down here? Kathy Schmidt. Didn't she write a blog? Did she write a blog? She's the one who's in marketing and promotion, and she wrote a fantastic blog post about why do we keep sticking to the status quo when it comes to book launches and book. Why are we doing this when we know it's not going to work most of the time? Yes,
she's singing my song. Absolutely. The other person to read on this, there's a publicist, Cassie Mans-Murray. She writes a Substack called Pine State Publicity. That's the name of her publicity firm. And she has written really eloquently for the last year or more about what it takes to get coverage for a book or for an author. And like it or not, more and more, the angle has to do with the author and less the book. So often I hear authors say, why do I have to write and publish op-eds or essays or articles when what I've written is a novel and I want you to read the novel? Who cares about my personal essay about this novel? But I think she writes very convincingly about the intersection of the author and the work, what's happening in the culture, and how to make all of this feel relevant and resonant in specifically in this very bizarre media environment we are now in. For those who don't know, yes, it is very bizarre. And it's very hard to get attention.
Yeah. Are these posts still available through your website, Jane?
Oh yeah. Cassie Mans-Murray, her Substack is free for all. You do not have to pay. And I think Kathleen Schmidt, who you referenced, she does a Substack called Publishing Confidential, who I reference a lot in my own newsletter. And a lot of the posts that you mentioned about can we please stop doing the same old things that don't work anymore, that one's free for everyone to read. So those two people are good for a wake-up call about book publicity.
Okay. Gosh, we're coming close to the end here. I wanted to ask you also about nonfiction. You had predicted that non-sale fiction sales will continue to decline in 2026. Maybe due to competition from faster, cheaper information sources. Yeah. Is this, in your view, a symptom of maybe nonfiction as a category, or is it a signal that books are no longer the primary container of expertise? Do you think this is going to change as we get closer to the midterm elections in the U.S.?
I think it's a lot of different things layered on top of each other. I think a lot of it has to do with how we get information, education, entertainment now of the nonfiction variety. I think we're often listening to podcasts. We're reading Substacks instead of a book, since I've been recommending Substacks and not books during this whole conversation. I know it is. And I run a newsletter. I'm part of the problem. And now there's AI, of course, where, I always tell the story about how when I had to buy, and I know this isn't books, but it's the same principle. When I had to buy a new car this year, I got the issue of Consumer Reports, about their new car buying guide. But the thing that really, really helped me was going to AI and asking it to do a deep research report on buying a car. I used them together. Now, you could say, well, you still bought the magazine, but it was also given to me by my mother-in-law, so I didn't have to buy it. But there's so much stuff that we seek online where it's just meant to solve a problem quickly. It doesn't have to be artful. Sometimes it doesn't even matter who it's coming from. Sometimes we just want neutral, bland, objective, here are the facts about this, like I wanted with a car. So for nonfiction to thrive in the future, I think whoever's writing it, they have to double down on what makes them weird, what their obsessions are, how they are way off from like that middle of the road neutral norm, because AI can give us that in spades. There is this other issue of current events are sending people to fiction for escapism. I think there's some generational aspects to this as well, which we don't have time to get into. But it is really hard to stand out right now. And publishers, for anyone looking at the traditional side of the market, publishers are, very risk averse when it comes to nonfiction at the moment, because they don't know if they can or will break out with the message in the current media environment.
Right. And it's what we're seeing with our data too, especially when it comes to escapism and cozy mysteries and just people want happy endings and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to remind our audience that we've only got a couple minutes left here. So if you have questions for Jane, she's here for you.
I am.
Yeah. So as we kind of get close to a close here, Jane, when you zoom out across sort of everything that you tracked in 2025 and everything you're sort of watching in 2026, AI, audio, different platforms, media blind spots, lawsuits, all of it. Is there a single principle that you think authors should find their anchor if they want to build a career that lasts beyond the next, say, trend cycle?
I always point to that direct relationship with your readers, whatever that means to you. I think for some of us, it has to do with email newsletters and having the email address as far as like the technical piece of it. But it's not just the email address, but how do you communicate to people, to the readership with that? What sort of consistency do you bring to it? How are you showing up? How is your voice coming through? And what opportunities are there for engagement? That may or may not be through the newsletter. It could be at events, in person. We didn't talk about events and conferences and selling direct much today, or at least not yet. But I think that's also a piece of it, and meeting readers wherever they are, whether it's in person or online. Something that happened the year prior, which we may have spoken about a year ago, was Baventi. And this is a platform that helps authors sell direct at events, but also increasingly in other ways too. And we're also seeing, in tandem with that, the rise of special editions, deluxe editions, more exclusive experiences and opportunities. So that gives you a lot of power and loyalty when people, they're not going to Amazon or whatever the place is. They're coming to you. They want to have an interaction with you. That's going to help you no matter how the market shifts, what platforms are in ascendance or not. And I don't think some people will get really wrapped up in, should I use TikTok or should I use Facebook, or, what's the next X, whatever the trends are talking about. People will wonder, should I move to this new place? And I wouldn't get so caught up in that discussion or in chasing what the ascendant platform is. I think what matters more is that you have that consistency in showing up and you're comfortable with it and it's not burning you out, and you're connecting with the people who most value what you do.
Perfect. I love that. Yeah, and I feel that that's something that we've talked about on this podcast before, is that connection with readers is really what helps stand indie authors apart from their
Yes.
traditional counterparts. So get out there, build those newsletters, keep that close connection with your readers.
Crowdfunding can help with that too, for those I think this has also gained a lot of popularity in recent years, doing crowdfunding campaigns for pre-orders or for deluxe editions or boxes. That's one way to like kind of get your feet wet that I consider pretty low risk. And I've been reporting a lot recently on direct sales and how authors are taking, really investing in forming those direct sales relationships, which again preserves more of your power and control rather than giving it to a platform.
Do you feel crowdfunding could actually serve authors who are maybe newer at this, maybe within their first or second year? Really?
I do. It just has to be done very thoughtfully.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, you have to like do a little bit of math. Like I would suggest
I'm
writing.
out.
Yeah. I would suggest thinking about, okay, how many people do you reach? It's only going to be a small percentage of that who actually pitch in or, chip into that campaign. And you want to think about what are the ways you're going to spread word about this campaign.
Yeah.
You have to have it seeded, with some early supporters who are then going to go off and talk about it. And you also need some really good assets to complement that campaign. And by that, I mean, you need some good visuals, a good video, something that makes people like get excited and have enthusiasm for what you're planning to send them.
Okay. That's really good advice. Before we let you go, I want to remind everybody to please check out Jane's website. Do yourselves a favor and sign up for the Bottom Line newsletter. Like, subscribe to that newsletter. I read it religiously every single week. You need to keep in touch with your industry, the industry that you're working in, everybody. Because things are coming and going so quickly, especially today. So go there, bookmark that website. And then, can I share your book cover?
Oh, sure.
As well. So Jane is literally the author of The Business of Being a Writer. It's in its second edition now. It doesn't just cover like how to be a novelist or how to be a self-published author. It kind of goes through the gamut of many different aspects of being a writer. What I enjoyed about it, I didn't finish it yet, but what I enjoyed about it is you're like, this is hard. Like
Yeah.
And you're very straightforward with that. But at the same time, you also are, I don't know if you meant to do this, but you're also very inspirational. Like you inspire people. You're like, this is hard, but you can do it. And here's how to do it.
Yeah, I don't like to sugarcoat anything.
You didn't.
But there's so many ways to make this work. I do strongly believe that you don't have to feel trapped in some sort of bad system or bad platform. There are ways to use those systems to your own ends while preserving your values and earning a living the way that suits you best.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I can talk to you all day. It's just, you're just this wealth. You're like a fountain of knowledge, just spewing forth wisdom. So
thank you, Jim.
We so appreciate you. Please come back and see us soon. You have an open invitation. I hope you know that.
Thank you. Yeah, I always love talking with you all. You guys have been in the business now for almost as long as I have. Like I think I only outpace you by like 1 or 2 years.
Well,
so.
We're gonna try to catch up with you there. And with the team, I'm blessed with a great team. Everybody works really, really hard, and I think the reason it works, and I think the reason why you're in this industry and you've stayed and you have the longevity that you do, is you love what you do and you love the mission that you're on, helping authors. And
I do.
We feel the same.
Yeah.
A couple of things I wanted to mention here to our viewers out there. For those of you who have joined us today and week in and week out, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. If you enjoyed today's episode, if you could do us a favor and share this episode with your author friends, we would really appreciate it. If you want to keep in touch with what we're doing and future episodes and future topics and future guests, you can bookmark d2dlive.com. And for those of you who are perhaps joining us for the very first time today, maybe you're dipping your toe into the indie publishing waters, welcome. you can sign up for a free account at Draft2Digital just simply by going to draft2digital.com. Well, that puts a cap on this, Jane. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Jan.
If you want to hang out backstage for a second, maybe grab a quick snack. I'll meet you back there. I'm going to play a quick commercial here for D2D Print. Everybody, thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draft2digital.com.